Hi, everyone, for the next episode of Double Coverage with Jacquie and Kassidy Hill. This episode is the one with all the hoopla. Kassidy, it's nice being back.
I know, we're so glad to have you back, Jacquie. It felt weird without you last week. Don't leave me ever again.
I'll try not to leave you all alone again, but I'm glad you had some guests kind of help you out here a little bit. And we also had a great interview with Kevin, so I was really appreciative that he was able to come on last week and talk about recruiting, how it's changing, and with the name, image, and likeness, and how that's going to affect UF and recruiting. So that was a lot of great info that Kevin helped out. And we're going to start off this week's episode, Kassidy, with something that I think is going to get Gator Nation a little bit riled up. I'm assuming
a little bit rowdy.
a little bit rowdy. So obviously a lot of people have been talking about Gator basketball head coach Mike White. They're talking about the exodus of players leaving the program, either to
another one left last night.
Scotty Lewis decided to enter the NBA draft. You have Trey Mann leaving, Noah Locke entering a transfer portal. A lot of guys, 6 guys so far as of Friday at 1:45 p.m. I want to reiterate the time, because if this is, posted and at like Friday at 4 p.m. someone else decides to leave, I have to timestamp this.
So there's a chance we could see 2 or 3 more going by tonight. Who knows, with the way things have been going.
And also on Thursday, athletic director Scott Stricklin came out on an interview on the Steve Russo show, saying that he sees Mike White as long-term at Florida. So obviously that has people riled up.
Yes.
A lot of the Florida fan base, on social media, obviously, where this is how we get, just the pulse of what's going on around Gator Nation. Right. Fans are not happy with that interview. A lot of people are not happy with the direction of the basketball program. And Kassidy, we talked about this on the Buddy Martin show. I was a huge Mike White fan during the hire. I thought, there were a couple times where you could realistically have excuses. And even this year, you can say, Keontae Johnson is not playing. That was his best player. That was his leader. And then COVID protocols and all that. But you can't excuse the consistent problems. Basically, he's been consistently inconsistent. It looks like he's been rebuilding almost every year. And that's going to be something that he's going to do this offseason once again. And it always looks like he's always trying to adjust his system rather than getting the players for his system. It always seems he's trying to change his system to fit his players.
Yeah. And I would even take it a step further and say he's trying to change his system to fit the players he has, but still be within his system instead of just molding to the skill set of his players, which sounds like a really convoluted way of explaining it. But essentially, I think he has a type of style he likes to run, and he doesn't recruit for that style. And then he gets the players in there and tries to shoehorn them into that style, if that makes sense. And he's having to, he wants to play fast. He's always talked about that since the day he was hired. Fast. And then every year there's another reason for why they can't play fast that year. We don't have a point guard to run that offense. We don't have we don't have a presence underneath the basket to do that. For example, with Andrew Nembhard, we've talked about this before, but Mike White's style and Andrew Nembhard's game did not mesh.
No.
And that's not a knock on either one of them. They just didn't go well together. But how do you turn down one of the best recruits in the country? But then you were trying to let Andrew Nembhard run his game while the other 4 guys still ran Mike White's offense.
Right.
And that's why it just fell apart more times than not. And we've talked ad nauseum about Mike White, but the reason we wanted to bring it up today was because of Scott Stricklin's comments. So let me go back specifically to that. I have a problem with those comments, much like most of the fan base does. However, I think my problem is a little bit different. My problem with it is that I don't think you should ever 100% throw your support behind a guy like that. And I know that sounds weird, because it's like, why would you not support your guy? Why would you not be there and show support for him? You should. But when you speak in absolutes, you either keep yourself from making a necessary change down the road because you've already promised something you can't keep, or you end up breaking your promise. And then that looks bad to the next coach. Well, you promised that guy you would keep him and that he wasn't going anywhere. And then a year later, you fired him. So while you should always support, especially as an AD, and I think Scott Stricklin is an excellent athletic director, but while you should always support your guy, I don't think you should ever speak in absolutes, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what situation you might get put in. You never know if they make up death threats or, things like that. Then you're sitting there going, well, crap, what do I do? Because 2 months ago, I said he was going to be here for years. And so that's what bothered me more than anything about those comments, was just the absolute uncertainty of it in a sport, in a world that has no absolutes.
Honestly, what bothered me was kind of on the same lines that you said, saying this is absolute, but also, you're ignoring all the problems that the program is facing. And I understood Scott Stricklin's point. He also talked about how Florida wasn't the worst basketball team in the country when it comes to transfers, that there are many other programs that are worse. And I'm sure, but do you want to
be your
barometer though? That's what I'm saying. Are you sure you're going to be on that list?
Yeah.
And I get it too. This is the NCAA allowing transfers and not sitting out for the first year. I get it. And Scott Stricklin is a huge fan of that. He even said he's okay with intra-conference transfers and not sitting out in the SEC. So I get it. Scott Stricklin, you have to give him one thing. I don't want to call him a politician, but he's really good about moving forward with the times. He's also really good about, most of the times, reading the room.
Right. That's what makes him such a great athletic director. Yes. And he's been so successful at Florida, is he knows how to connect to the fan base and his coaches. He's done such a good job at keeping one foot in the administration and one foot in the marketing PR side, because he can merge those two. He can bring those two together. This is the first time I think he's ever had a misstep. And listen, he's done enough good that I'm not counting this against Scott Stricklin. And I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to support his guy.
He's also trying not to make, he's not dumb. He knows that there's a problem with the fan base and, the basketball program. He doesn't want this fan base to be apathetic. So he's trying to create some excitement off this program. And I get it. If you look at Mike White's NCAA tournament numbers, they're very good.
Right.
And I get it, but it's kind of like what we talked on the Buddy Martin show. His SEC conference numbers, his SEC tournament numbers, that's where it's so disappointing. And honestly, they face the same teams over and over again, and that's your barometer. You can compare yourself to other programs that way. And so a tournament, it's really hard to do that. And when you look at what he's doing in the SEC, you're like, man, why are you averaging 5th place? I think it's what
something like middle of the pack for sure.
Middle of the pack in the SEC. He's got talent to be at least in the top 3. And I think Billy Donovan averaged in the top 3 when he was the head coach. And it's really bad.
When Billy was here, the SEC consistently came down to Florida or Kentucky.
So, I know you shouldn't compare it to Billy Donovan. It's like, it's hard. You can't compare it. But at the same time, you want to be where Florida can be. And I think middle of the pack, number 5, like 5th in the SEC, is not where they should be. So I think that is the problem where most of the fan base is. You're consistently average when you should be more. You're consistently rebuilding. You're consistently, since I've covered Florida, I've asked almost the same question as far as, you always say, like, you need an alpha leader. Who's stepping up? Because he always been saying you need an alpha leader. And granted, Keontae Johnson would have been that leader this year. But at the same time, that was a conversation that, we've had several times about that issue. You needed that fire. You needed that intensity. And, all programs have more than one guy.
At some point, you have to wonder if and this is going to sound like I'm calling him out, and I don't mean to, because I've said before, I really like Mike White. I think he's a great guy. I think
he's a great person. Yes,
the values he runs the program with are really, really good, and that's what Scott Stricklin probably really likes as well. He's never in trouble. He never has disciplinary issues with his team, and that is something to want and desire in a coach. But is he so X's and O's that he has a hard time with the locker room? Because if you don't have a leader at some point you have to wonder, is that indicative of the coaching staff not inspiring one?
Right.
And maybe that's on the assistant coaches.
Maybe.
But as the man at the top, the buck stops with Mike White. And that's something he has to, at some point, if you think a guy has it in him, pull him aside and challenge it in him.
Yeah, like I thought Scotty Lewis would be one of those guys.
Yes.
He saw what he did over the summer, kind of taking the lead for activism.
He clearly has the ability to be that leader.
Right? Like leading the Black Lives Matter march in Gainesville, where the football team was also present. A lot of the other athletes were there. He was the one who organized it. He did it in his, home state. He did it in Brooklyn. He was a guy who was leading. Mm-hmm. And I did not see that leader on the court, but obviously he has that personality to be a leader. So the question is, why can't he translate that on the court? Mm-hmm. Especially after Keontae Johnson went down. So I think those are all the questions that there should be serious questions that Strickland is asking and other people around the program. So my question now is, during the off season, after Strickland, put his, I guess, seal of approval on the Mike White program, are we going to see changes in his assistant staff? Mm-hmm. That's usually the first step, to be honest. Yeah. That's usually the first step, especially when you have.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he has a pretty young assistant staff.
Yes, this is a pretty young assistant staff, and I think that's the thing.
Maybe you just need a veteran.
He needs to figure out a way to learn how to be a CEO of a program like Florida. I think that is, Dan Mullen does an excellent job as being a CEO of the program. Although there are things that, Dan Mullen knows his weaknesses within the program. He understands it, we're talking later on in the show about the recruiting office. He went in and got Corey Bell. So Dan Mullen understands the weaknesses in his program. And I think Mike White needs to kind of step away and see how his program can work more effectively and see what part of this program needs change. And I think maybe Mike White needs to step away from the basketball and look at the bigger picture of seeing what's going on. Why can't these guys just turn on mentally? Because a lot of the times it's mental lapses.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes I think Mike White just like overthinks himself. And just, maybe when you're recruiting, I covered UVA and Tony Bennett, and Tony Bennett did not look at stars a lot of times. And I get it. You want to recruit the top talent of the team, but UVA doesn't get 5 4-stars, and they won the national title, just, and when you look at that, you have to go for the system. And that's what Tony Bennett has done. He's found players that fit his system. He found players that have the personality that fit not only his system, but also for UVA education, which is a very different ballgame when it comes to universities. I remember covering UVA football, and those guys had to take an exam on Friday in class before going to game on Saturday. And if they had a ACC Friday night game, they still had class on Friday. So UVA is a different ballgame when it comes to that. So those coaches have different criteria when they have to recruiting, but that just puts a lot, when you think about it, and you see where UVA basketball has been the last few years, you have to give Tony Bennett even more credit in how he is able to recruit players that fit his system and that culture. So when you look at Mike White, he has some Tony Bennett tendencies. When I've covered Tony Bennett, you can see some things on that Mike White, except Mike White theoretically wants to be quicker on offense, and Tony Bennett will never be quick on offense. So I could see some things similar, but the only thing that Mike White hasn't done is he hasn't recruited players for his system and his, this is his opportunity, to be frank. He's losing so many guys. So why don't you go to the transfer portal? And that's what's going to end up happening. Grab those veterans.
I think they did get a transfer. I think they did get a transfer a couple hours ago. Let me pull up the name here. But, and all of this to say, that's not just, even with Scott Stricklin throwing his support behind him publicly, that's not to say he's not still having these conversations with Michael. Correct. Yeah. Because those conversations do have to happen.
Right.
Now I can't find the kid's name. But they do have to happen, because when you lose this many guys in this short of a span, something's wrong.
Right.
It's hard not to say so otherwise. And he has to realize that. Here it is. I think Brandon McKissick.
So again, you're just, trying to see how this program moves forward. Any athletic director is going to have those conversations to see how they're going to move forward. I don't like I said on the Buddy Martin show, I never thought Mike White was going to get fired this year. I think there were so many things that was going on within the program, off the court as well as on the court with everything going on. I just didn't see it. And I also didn't see it because of the buyout. I understood that Florida would have to be paying him until his contract ran out. That's what the situation was financially for this. And if Florida wasn't willing to, pay for certain coaches on the football team to leave, then I never thought this was going to happen on the basketball program. So I didn't think the firing was going to happen this year. I didn't think they were going to part ways like that. He didn't pull a Jim McElwain. He didn't say he got death threats. So I didn't see that. There was not going to be a firing for cause. So I think right now it's just trying to see how this program can move forward with the current head coach and then kind of go from there. And I still believe, although what Strickland said on Thursday about seeing Mike White long-term, I still think that Mike White his seat is warm for next season. I don't see how it can't be warm for next season.
Right.
Not just because Strickland might think, oh, this is my long-term plan, but if come, the first game of the year and there's not fans in the stands because they're apathetic and you're finally and, there's no more social distancing and you're not selling out the O-Dome, that is going to look down. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I think Mike White's seat will be a little warm, unless he comes out next year and blows everybody away, finds guys that fit the system.
That's what it's going to take.
Yeah, but if he doesn't compete, and again, I'm not going to say that he needs to win the NCAA tournament or lose his job, but if he's competitive in the SEC, gets out of the middle of the pack, competes maybe top 2, I'll even say top 3, but goes further in the SEC tournament, I think you're going to see a little more of the fan base saying, okay, now we see the progress, but there better not be another exodus after next year. So yeah,
right.
So that's
and I agree. It is going to be a warm seat, which is why to bring it all together was my biggest problem with Strickland's comments, because, you can't say that and then knowing that you might have to let him go after next year. It's just, that gets you in trouble. Anyways, let's talk a little bit of football. Florida had their pro day this week. I think 16 guys plus a couple of former guys came out to work out for coaches and scouts from 31 of the 32 teams, I believe, were there. Urban Meyer was there, coming from just down the road. Jacksonville Jaguars came back to his old stomping grounds. And then I don't know if there were any other head coaches there, but there were, like I said, scouts from just about every team. Of course, the star of the day was Kyle Pitts. He ran an unbelievable 40 of 4.44 at his height and weight is just unreal. Then again, a lot of the guys yesterday ran 4.3s and 4.4s. I think if we had been in Indianapolis for the combine and had the laser timer, those times would have looked a little different. But on the hand timers, everybody was super fast. But Kyle Pitts, of course, star of the day. He just needed to do average to back up, to go along with his tape when he was still going to be top 10. He went above and beyond. He was incredible. Kadarius Toney was another one that really showed out. Trey Grimes didn't have the best numbers compared to Toney and Pitts, but he still had pretty strong numbers in the receiving category. So he kind of did what we thought he would, put up good numbers, and it's going to cause people to go back and look at his tape. And I asked him afterwards, how do you stand out when they're here to see Pitts and Toney? And he said, that just works for me, because they come to see Pitts and Toney, they turn on the tape to look at Pitts and Toney, and they're going to see me too. And so I think that he's right. That does work in his favor. But one of the surprising stars of the day was Marco Wilson. He put up insane numbers. He put up a bench press. He did 26 reps on the bench press. That would have blown away every other corner if it had been in Indianapolis at the combine. It would have been in the top percentile overall. And I think it probably would have set a record if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. It was just, that's insane, especially for a corner. 26 reps. And he jumped so high on his vertical jump that he went above all of the levels of measurement.
I saw the Randy Mickens video from the
Randy Mickens of Gator football. He puts out only great stuff. composited Marco Wilson's vertical jump with a NASA liftoff.
Perfect.
It's incredible. Go watch it. But Marco needed that day. And I want to talk about Marco a little bit. And Jackie, feel free to jump in here. Marco needed that day after 2020 because he had good tape before 2020. He could have gone into the draft last year and been one of the top guys at his position. He elected to come back for one more year because he felt like there was stuff he still needed to work on. And instead of taking that step forward, I think we can all admit he regressed. And then it
was like he needed to get away from CJ Henderson's shadow, and unfortunately 2020 did not help that.
Yeah, I realized maybe CJ helped him. And then of course the lasting image so many people had of Marco was throwing that shoe in the LSU game, which gave them a fresh set of downs. They were able to kick a field goal, win the game. It was just one of the most insane games I couldn't even see the field when it happened because of all the fog. It was just one of the most insane games I've ever been at. That being said, Marco still gets hate for that. And I understand it's so tough to think about what could have been with that 2020 season and how much that LSU game derailed it. But we talked a little bit about this the other night. It's as much as you can say, yes, that shouldn't have happened. It's hard to justify the death threats. And that's not a McElwain exaggeration, but the literal death threats and the hate.
Just look at his mentions after that, and even his dad's mentions as well. It was really rough. And I get it. People were upset. And I know what Marco Wilson was probably very upset at that moment as well. And I get it. And I get everything around it. I'm not a fan of what he did. I'm not a fan of how Dan Mullen kind of handled that situation publicly. Even after a couple of days, I was not a fan of any of that. But no one should be a keyboard warrior and attack someone like that and bully them, something like that. That is not acceptable. Especially because Marco Wilson's shoe did not lose them the game.
Right.
A lot of other things led to them losing the game. Was it the nail in the coffin? Yes. But so many other things happened during that game. Marco Wilson was not the reason they lost. And I think that's where a lot of people just put so much on Marco, blaming him for that loss against LSU. But he's not
without
the
the shoe, he would have been the reason they won.
Yes, without the shoe, he would have been the reason they won.
Yeah. And so he's had to come to grips with that's part of his reputation and that's part of his legacy, quote unquote, here at Florida now, is that shoe. And so it was going to get brought up in meetings with NFL coaches and scouts because it's at that point, it's a maturity question. Can you handle the emotions and the passionate times in a game without losing us the game? And so when we spoke to Marco after pro day, and let me back up. So he knew he needed a great pro day to kind of wipe that out and remind people how talented he really is, the skill set he does have, and what he can bring to a team. And he was just, it's weird to say this in a day that featured Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney, but Marco Wilson was the star of the day. He just put up insane numbers, like we said, in the bench press and the vertical, but also in the 40. He said he could have broke a 4.29. I'd like to see that to believe it, but that he was still at a 4.3. That's so fast. He did great in the cone drills. He did good in the DB drills. And so I think that really did help him. And it kind of reminded a lot of those coaches and scouts, oh yeah, we can work with this kid. We can do something with what he brings to the table. So I was really happy for him and really, glad to see him sort of bounce back and change the narrative around what he could bring to a team as the draft gets closer and closer. After his pro day, we got to talk to him, and I asked him specifically about what he learned from that LSU game, how much it gets brought up, and what is it doing to affect his draft stock, and furthermore, his legacy as a Florida Gator. And this is what he had to say.
Sometimes the LSU play gets brought up, but I don't run away from it. I mean, it's part of my life, and things happen. And I just answer them in the way I need to, which is in the LSU game. Had a lot of energy, made a good play, was excited, and just made an unfortunate mistake, and that's all that is. I wish it never happened, but things happen. Everything's not going to go your way. You're going to face adversity in your life. I just see how this can affect my team, affect me, affect my family, stuff like that. Open my eyes to a lot of things. It's certainly not something I'll ever do again. If you watch my play, people might think I have, they would say like mental issues, like character issues, but that's never the case. I've never gotten a personal foul like that in my life, and you can cut the film back on and see that. Along with that, I'm unhappy that it happened, but happy at the same time because it taught me a lot of lessons for moving forward in my life. Like I said, I just really learned how just a silly mistake could affect me. I mean, I was getting disgusting messages in my Instagram, stuff like that. Just really see how quick people could really just turn on you and how negative they could really be in a tough situation. How people could really not understand how things may play out in life. But it's understandable. I mean, I learned that lesson. Also learned that my brothers that I had on this team were really, they're really here for me. They didn't like beat me up or anything in the locker room. They just talked to me, knew we had a game coming up next week, and just got ready to attack that. And I just learned that this past year, I really just learned that your mental health is really just as important as your physical health, because if you don't have mental health, you're not going to be able to just accomplish the things you want to accomplish.
That was great stuff hearing from Marco Wilson, and I like his, candid answers and just listening to what he went through and just now moving forward. So again, you said it best, Kassidy. He stole the show, and it was nice to see. It was kind of like a little bit of a redemption story that we needed from 2020. It felt more 2021.
Yeah, I just thought about something. I literally just thought about this. I have this picture here that Marco drew for me years ago. And I still keep it on my desk in my area. It was at a media day or something. And I found out he was an artist. And so he just sketched this out real quick. I don't know what it is.
Looks like a sea monster.
Yeah, it's something to do with anime. He's into gaming and anime, but it showed he was talented. So sorry, side note, I just thought about that. Continue on.
But yeah, I just think it was nice seeing a little bit of a redemption story on there, and for him taking the next step. So I think he at least impressed a few of the scouts, and he's not the only one that impressed us this week, Kassidy. I think Dan Mullen impressed us this week by zeroing in on a good hire on the recruiting front.
Great hire.
Corey Bell is back in Gainesville. A lot of you are familiar with Corey Bell. He was the DB coach for Jim McWayne for his last year, which is unfortunate. He only had 1 year in Gainesville. He's a good guy on the field, but he's an excellent recruiter. And again, we said this at the top of the show, that Dan Mullen knows where the weaknesses are in this program, realized he needed to, make that recruiting room a little better. And he did by far. And, we talked about this on the Buddy Martin show. Kassidy and I have a show every Tuesday night on Buddy Martin's Facebook page. So make sure you check it out there. We do some crossovers with Buddy. So, and we talked about Corey Bell and how great that hire is and what an impact he's going to do. So here, take a listen.
I think we have to mention the addition of Corey Bell. I am a huge Corey Bell, fan from when he was at Florida. I thought when Dan Mullen came on the scene, I thought Corey Bell should have been one of the guys he kept, because not only I believe he's a good DB coach, he's an excellent recruiter, and he had a couple. So during that time, obviously, it was just coming towards early signing day, and prior to McWayne being fired, there were some DBs that you're seeing in top SEC programs right now that were close to coming to Florida because of Corey Bell. Mm-hmm. And I think Dan Mullen underestimated what Corey Bell could bring to a program. I think a lot of it was to do because Corey Bell and Randy Shannon were kind of like, they were close, and I think they just wanted to cleanse the program completely. And they chose, Sider to stay, and obviously Sider left. But I think Corey Bell brings you an excellent recruiter, a guy who knows the game and is so relatable to recruits and recruits' families. I know the big thing that this program and what Dan Mullen's done that gets the most criticism is recruiting. And this was a huge recruiting pickup for them, because I think you're going to get someone that on day one is already going to get people's, tongues wagging, because people in South Florida respect Corey Bell a lot. So you're going to have guys that might have not been able to, no, not even talking about Florida. They're going to start talking about Florida. You're also going to have a lot of high school coaches that respects Corey Bell. He was at UCF, obviously, with Randy Shannon as the DC. So he's been in Florida all this time. And he is a guy that's well respected in Central Florida, well respected here when he was at Florida. So I think this was a big win for Dan Mullen, and he's going to bring a lot to the table. Honestly, I think one of the worst decisions Dan Mullen had was getting Charlton Warren and not making Corey Bell the cornerbacks coach when he did. I think the secondary would be very different right now if Corey Bell was on the staff, but you can't turn back time. So this is a great move forward for Dan Mullen, changing things on one area that I feel like still needs help in. Now, the only thing moving forward now, you've got you've got a staff that has a lot of connections now. You look at the recruiting personnel that they have put together now, including Corey Bell, and you have guys that have contacts and respectability among several different areas of the state of Florida, because you still want to recruit in state, but also around the country. The thing is now, you need to make sure your recruiting department is on the same page. You need to make sure communication is very good between everybody. Everybody needs the same page. That is one thing, and I know people hate when I give positive feedback on Jim McElwain's tenure, but Jim McElwain's recruiting office was on the same page. His development was a completely different story, but Jim McElwain was able to put together a great recruiting staff that, Drew Hughes was an excellent recruiting coordinator, and he was able to really kind of submit one message, and it had just everyone knew who was a take, who was not a take, which guys were, top on their list, which guys wasn't top of the list, which one guys were like, they're still evaluating. Everyone was on the same page. And I think since Dan Mullen's been at Florida, we still have problems with that. That's the one thing that Gators still haven't had a cohesive recruiting office. I think Corey Bell's addition is great, but you can't have so many great pieces where you don't have a centralized message. So as long as that part is fixed, I think Florida is going to move in a good direction forward. And it doesn't hurt that you have a guy who's good at recruiting, but is also a good coach and developer of talent, because not only he will get that 5-star or 4-star recruit, but he's going to go after kind of what we talked about Mike White. He's not going to get a guy who's a 5-star or 4-star just to get a 5-star or 4-star. He's going to get a guy that can be developed into the system because he understands how to develop a player and knows football. So he's able to get a guy who can fit into your system. So I think it was a good, a great hire. It was a few years late, but at least it was a hire.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the thing I like the most about it, because I know that there's a lot of people and there's a huge argument that he should have been the cornerback coach years ago.
The players wanted him.
Yeah, maybe he should still be again.
Marco Wilson and CJ Henderson were huge fans of Corey Bell.
Right, exactly. And even when they hired Torian Gray, I know that they had also considered Corey Bell at that point again as well.
Corey Bell was on the short list, right?
Yeah, and then even this year when they, what was it, a couple months ago when they hired new guys, again, Corey Bell was on that short list. I almost have to wonder if they already knew at the time that they were going after him for this position. And that's why he wasn't hired as the corners coach. That being said, like you said, he is a great cornerback coach. I mean, my goodness, he put who all would have been under him. I'm trying to think. There was a stretch there, and this was when really the whole DBU thing picked back up again for Florida, where Florida was putting a lot of corners in the league. They didn't all last, but they put a lot in the league. And I think a lot of that is because of Corey Bell. And so all of that to say, though, I like this position that he's in, and I looked it up to make sure I said it right. He's the assistant director of player personnel.
Right.
His only focus is recruiting, because as great of a cornerback coach that Corey Bell is, like you said, he's an excellent recruiter. That is his strength. And that's why he continued to show up on these short lists this past year and the year before that, because Florida fans knew, pundits knew The problem within Mullen's program was the recruiting aspect of it. How could it get stronger? Bring in a great recruiter like Corey Bell. That'll help. Let him coach whatever he wants to coach. Just bring him in and put him on staff. Well, now he's on staff. His only focus is recruiting. And I think more than anything, like you said, that'll help provide a central message, because now you have somebody who knows what it takes to be successful in that area, and they can devote all of their attention to it. So I think it's going to be huge for Florida, just having him specifically in that role. Corey Bell is such a good hire. We hope to talk to him at some point soon too. Jacquie, it was so great to have you back. I don't like doing this without you. So thank you for joining us again this week.
It was so nice being back and sharing opinions. My husband doesn't have the patience enough to listen to all my opinions. So it's been nice.
Well, you always have a spot here, of course. I mean, your name is in the title, so of course. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, things you want us to address, drop them in the YouTube comments, drop them in the Twitter comments. We will obviously get to those next week. Come back next week for the next episode of Double Coverage with Jacquie and Kassidy.